Welcome to The Grant, the EU funding podcast. The Grant. My name is Niels Tuller Winter, and I'm the creator, editor, and host of The Grant. The Grant is an independent podcast initiative with the ambition to dig into all corners of the EU R&D funding system on topics of interest for the full EU R&D funding community. This episode is part of the Timeline series with focus on proposal writing. The episode is number 27 in the series. Intellectual property rights, or IP in EU funding language, is one of these elements in a proposal that can suddenly put the proposal at stake. A lot of EU funding, in especially Horizon Europe, goes towards technology development and, hence, an important part of sorting out the collaboration between the consortium partners relates to who has the rights to the intellectual property rights coming out of the project as a result of the efforts. And, of course, sometimes the partners with a stake in the IP find it hard to make ends meet in the proposal phase. In other words, it is a very important element for any proposal developer to be on top of. I've been wanting to dig into IP for a long time, and finally I manage. IP lawyer Juan Luis Rodrigues from RTDS Group is an expert on exactly this with 25 proposals behind him. We sat down in the virtual podcast studio to sort out all the key elements to be aware of in relation to IP during the proposal writing. Please enjoy. Welcome to The Grant, the EU funding podcast. Now, today we're going to have an episode on something that is extremely important, that everybody who's been developing a proposal and doing a project, they know how important it is, especially if it's technical development or the development of technology. Now, first and foremost, welcome, Juan.
Hi. Morning. Well, good afternoon. Sorry.
Before we do anything else, short introduction.
Yes. So my name is Juan Luis Rodrigues. People usually call me Luis. I'm originally from Venezuela, but after finishing my Master of Law in Italy, I decided to stay longer in Europe. In 25 EU projects later, 11 years later, I'm still here in Vienna, dealing with the IP management, innovation management, data management issues in EU-funded projects.
That's a lot of projects, so that's good. It's good to have experience here. Now, I have been wanting for a long time to do IP, to do some episodes on IP, because it is vital in when you do EU projects to understand how to work with it both when you write proposals and when you carry out the projects. And you reached out. That happens more and more. That people, they reach out to me. So, and it was perfect because I have not been able to get someone yet to do IP, some episodes on that. So it's absolutely excellent. So we have agreed that we'll make 2 episodes here. So this is the first one. Here we will start out with IP in proposals. And the second episode is going to be naturally IP in projects. Now, just 2 lines on as a fly-in on IP in proposals.
Yeah, well, what I can say is that people always or often leave this to a later stage when the proposal is almost ready. We're talking about collaborative projects, and when you're sharing your results, your background, right? There are a lot of issues to be considered around the IP management topics, right? So it's not just the protection, is also about knowing the terms and conditions and dealing with a lot of agreements.
Yeah, and if we zoom a little bit out on the funding, funding landscape. This is relevant for where you need to develop a specific technology that can be patented. So it's always in relation to technology development. And so you of course have different corners. You have the collaborative products, and then you have the EIC, of where you have just one company or one entity. And the one entity projects, of course, it's important for them, but we're not going to talk so much about that corner now, because that's not where you run into troubles. The reason why we're going to have a full episode on the proposal here is, first of all, to have a look at the collaborative, especially Horizon Europe projects proposals, where you have a group of partners that need to agree on things. So this is where you often run into issues. So so that's what we're going to do in this episode.
My name is Denitsa Nikolova, and I sincerely recommend tuning in every week.
Now, the first block that we have here, that is why IP matters at the proposal stage. And maybe IP, for the, just to spell it, so it's intellectual property, right? So it's the ownership of the results that we're talking about here. So why does it matter at the proposal stage?
Yeah, well, also to add a little bit more on the previous question, that you're totally right. What is IP? Intellectual property tends to be, misunderstood and refer only to patents, but you have a way bigger catalog of intellectual property rights, and you should care about it depending on what field of technology are you working on, right? So why you should be careful about IP issues? Like I would say, in the proposal stage, what is important is the credibility, of your proposal. And if you do not have, for instance, a clear understanding of who's the owner of the background technology that will be perhaps further developed in the project, then you might be facing some issues later on, because you cannot exploit something that doesn't belong to you, or you cannot use something that doesn't belong to you without a private consent of the owner. Also, when you're talking about new technologies that you want to commercialize, it's also quite interesting to see the novelty of that technology from an IP perspective. Is it something that is patentable, or is it already patented? Because there you might have also some issues regarding, assessing the degree of innovation and the future commercialization of that technology.
Yeah, and it's actually, as a good fly in, probably an anecdote or anecdotal. So I've been early in my career developing proposals as a private, as a grants consultant. And this is, you have two peaks. We have two critical moments in the proposal phase when you write proposals for collaborative projects. It's the budget discussion.
Yes.
And it's the IP.
Yeah.
And the IP, if you have a consortium where you don't have crazy overlaps, where it's pretty clear who is interested in what, then to cut that cake, that can be, sometimes it can be surprisingly quickly done. But for the ones where you have overlaps, or where you have sort of complementaries moving towards competitors inside the same room, it can get really nasty. It's some of the toughest discussions I've ever been moderating.
Indeed, yeah.
Has been those kind of, here you have lawyers on the side, you have legal department and senior legal representatives. It's stuff like that.
Yeah, and also, don't forget about the researchers, RTOs, that was to publish as well something.
Yeah. But it's not as rough. They have the license, and the licenses that they at least it was so when I was. So the researchers, they just want to be able to continue the research within their career area that they are. So that's there, and they can of course be fearful about that, but not as fearful as the private companies.
Yes, of course.
So this is just to say, when you are writing proposals, when you are dealing with EU R&D projects, it's good to have it to have it a little bit up the priority list of things you need to take care of, or things that you need to address to the consortium. Maybe we take an early conversation about this. So this is because it is important. It's important for everybody where you have something concrete coming out of it. So it's important that to have those discussions early, to have a leveling expectations.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, you have no idea how many projects I've seen or proposal, right? As well, where people during the proposal phase, sometimes I delegate the drafting of the proposal to an expert, right? And the expert doesn't, go deeper in these discussions about IP management expectations and what it. In the proposal, you have to bring a credible path, right, to deliver your innovation, your results to the market or to real life applications. And in that context, I've seen proposals where these things are overlooked, these issues, and then later, once the proposal is granted, people do the reality check, and sometimes that's where a problem comes.
That's even worse.
Yeah. So even I think during the proposal phase, indeed, besides the budget, IP issues will break the consortium. Basically, you want to bring in the consortium as partners, because collaborative research or innovation actions, where you want to bring people that you trust, and to build trust, I think you have to get to some sort of transparency, right, on your expectations. It's very challenging, as you said, because everyone might think that they have, everyone has their own agenda. I'm a lawyer myself, so I can tell you, before jumping in this collaborative framework, I used to advise my clients to not share, and here, if you really want the innovation, the magic to happen, you really need to be willing to share this what you have, right, or what you want to expand on. That's very important.
Indeed, and this is what we're gonna get back to that as we move into the main blocks here. But indeed, it is it's delicate because it goes against what most, especially private companies, they like if they have to share things. But that's the whole nature of EU R&D collaborative projects. Yeah, it's
yes.
But maybe we should just move into the next section on when and how to start the IP conversation. So we already sort of indicated that should be early on, but have you go at it, Luis?
When you should start, right? I would say always from the beginning of the proposal. Well, the first idea of what the project should look like, right? What would be you have to come up with clear, exploitable results, right? This is something that the Commission wants to see. So when you're imagining what that market-ready application should be, or the business model behind, for the exploitation of something that will go into the market, you need to clarify who will be the components, suppliers, right? Behind each component, there are terms and conditions. There are intellectual property strategies that might be already defined before the project started, and also during the conception, the planning of the project, you have work packages to clarify. So maybe in that situation, you also have to anticipate milestones, that are related also in terms of IP management and exploitation planning.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't leave it basically to the end of the negotiation of the consortium agreement. You have to do it before.
Exactly, and this is what we're going to notch you all. This is what we would probably say many times in this conversation. Now, because the thing is, I just, as I said in the fly-in, you have critical elements. You have two critical. That's the budget and it's the IP. Full stop. This is what can. Of course, if you zoom a little bit out, it can also break the consortium if the coordinator leaves, if you don't have a coordinator, can't find. But if you look at, if we as a baseline say you have the consortium ready and that the writing process is going, then there are these two things that is critical for things to, both for an agreement and an accord between the parties, but also for the relationship. It's not just collaboration hardcore, it's also human psychology here. Yes. So if you get to a place where you really get cross with each other, but you manage to solve it and you send in, and then you need to be in a project for 4 years with these guys, so you don't, so it, and this only happens if you do it rushed, because if you don't do it rushed, then you have the time to get the sharp edges off, because everybody needs to bend toward each other. It can take several conversations to do so, but you need the time to level expectations with all partners, both, as Luis says, with the researchers and with the private corporate partners. It's very simple.
And think about this as well, right? The grant agreement, basically takes your proposal into the annex. So it is an agreement, right? You have obligations already defined. What is often one of these problems around intellectual property is that we promise a few things in the proposal, and then the European Commission or the funding agency is expecting us to deliver what we promised in the proposal, but we didn't go deeper in the details, right? So you might be forced to the expectations that you put, the ambitions you put in your proposal. The Commission might be expecting you to deliver something that you legally will not be able to deliver, right? Because you don't have the rights, or maybe that technology will not be patentable. You see, so it damages the credibility of the proposal. And if it's funded, you might also have to do perhaps some amendments after the grant. Right?
Yes. What you can say is that often these things are being caught by the evaluators, because you have to hand in an analysis in the proposal of what is the landscape for this technology, what is the state of the art. Yeah. So often that part of the analysis is, but of course you can slip through the cracks. But the thing is, nobody's asking you to have an agreement in between you when you send in the proposal. Yeah, it's not part of writing. That's not part of what they evaluate. Did you agree on your path? Did you agree on the IP? It's not part of it. So you can. This is why we're saying this now. That you do it in the proposal phase, because you can do this without having this conversation, and then when you need to sit down and do the consortium agreement, when you win, if you win the money, you have to agree on these things, and suddenly it can explode into your face.
Yes.
And that's probably the worst scenario, but that's also, then you would have a grant consultant or a proposal writer not very experienced if you
no. And I think, look, if you bring I know it's a little bit more extra work, but to have just a simple non-disclosure agreement, okay, or to define some maybe expectations in a memorandum of understanding. It's not a legally binding document, right? An MOU, but perhaps it's better than nothing, and then it's clear what you can, what would be the expectations, right, in case a proposal gets funded. I think it's just to bring trust, and I see that when partners really build this trust from the beginning, especially when you're working with big industry players, right? Everybody tend to be more relaxed, right? And things happen, right?
Yeah, so if we should try to give the listeners a sort of a bullet list on when and how to start this, so as early as possible, when you get the first partners in to accept the invitation to the dialogue, you already in some of the first emails you send, you flag to them that be aware, I as a proposal coordinator would like us to start this conversation, both bilaterally. So when you have the conversations with them, that you say, look, I just want to make sure that we are perfectly, that I know your expectation on this part. And then at the first consortium meeting that you will have in the proposal phase, that you have it as a bullet.
Yes.
Point that, and then, slowly build up the dialogue and conversation and see if you have any conflicts, because you might not have conflicts.
Yes.
But if you have, then you at least have the time to deal with it.
Yes. I would say, look, check the basic, right? Is the basics is check your background, the list of all the ingredients that you will need to bake your cake. Are they available? Are they all hours and from the people in the consortium, or things I've seen? Also, another anecdote: people talking about in a data-driven project, no one on in that table knew where was if they were allowed to exploit the data commercially, because some of the data was coming or available only through public databases, right? Or you need special requests from a ministry to provide you this access, the access to that data, and it's only for research purposes. So whatever you were planning about exploitation, commercial exploitation, it didn't go well. That's something that it requires more clarity. So assessing all the ingredients, all the background information that you're going to need, prototypes, data, everything for your project is essential. As looking into the terms and conditions for that, and what are the restrictions that you might need later on for post-project exploitation. That way, you might have a clear exploitation plan, in the proposal.
Correct. And then if you're a newbie, now I mentioned earlier, if you're an inexperienced proposer, right? But don't take it like this out there. Don't take it like diminishing, because we all did this once, the first time or second time, and we're a little bit like a dog in a bowling alley, right? So it's just, if you haven't tried this before, you're not going to think like this. You think like this when you have run into problems as a proposal writer. So it's giving you some heads up, right? So just here for the ones who have not been doing this so much. So who do you need to? Who are the typical partners? So of course, the people you need to talk to, the partner list you have in your Excel sheet. So the red flags you have. So you have the private companies, the one that has an interest in the results of the technological development, of the results that comes out. Them and the research partners. You need to make sure that they are, and they can both be RTOs or universities, naturally. Yes. And then if you are writing this on behalf of the coordinator, of course, you deal, you coordinate this with the proposal coordinator, the project coordinator. So the coordinator of the whole project should be normally there on board these meetings if you take them, if you are sitting and writing it for a client. And then, as mentioned, you mention it early and discuss it bilaterally. And then if you have, when you get, when you have the first discussion at the first consortium meeting, you will see if there are any elements where there is something where people need to bend towards each other. So
yes, indeed. Look, it wouldn't hurt to have. I know is when we're writing proposal, we're running against a deadline, and but if you manage to get at least one meeting, even internally, with your technology transfer department or with your in-house lawyer, they are also programs. For instance, you can get for some help from the IPR help desk of the European Commission, where they can explain you where you should look into when it comes to assessing the terms and conditions, right, for the use of your information. I think this is precious, right? A lawyer doesn't have to be all the time during the discussion of the expectations and the proposal, but it certainly helps to have someone that understands the IP landscape, that has a vision, an IP strategies. From the companies, industry, they normally have a clear vision, right? They have strategies for short, mid, and long term. What type of products they will like to even market in 10 years, so you can see where the technology is moving, the technology development is moving. So, but in the case of SMEs, they don't have in-house lawyers. Sometimes they see that talking to a lawyer, it's a lot of cost, it's too complicated. So yeah, I think it's a little bit tricky, but certainly it will make sense just to have at least 1 hour, maybe just with someone that understands IP management, and they can guide you through where to find the information that you need for your proposal, right? The universities, they have the technology transfer department, and they should do that work for researchers.
Yes, the universities and RTOs, they have these kind of resources normally. So, but what is definitely worth recommending is the NCPs. Because you always have IP and legal NCPs throughout each country. So, and they are there. That's what they are for. To at least give you some guidance on how to deal with specific, also quite tricky legal issues. I've seen it myself as an NCP. I was not an IP, but I saw my colleagues sitting with this, dealing with quite complex cases. So it's definitely so. That doesn't cost you €1. But it also, if it's complex, you might run into that they won't be able to give you a definite answer, and then you might need to invest in professional legal support. But
yeah, but not too much. It's a proposal stage, right? There's also a lot of tools. For instance, when it comes to assessing the prior art, you're talking about something that is innovative and new. You can check out some of the website of the databases of patent office. They are available. They're for free. They are very easy to use. Just to do a very preliminary mapping, right, of how technology is evolving, or who are the key players behind that a specific technology that you're planning to develop in the project. So that brings a little bit more of clarity and credibility to your proposal.
Yeah. I think we are good with this section, so maybe we should move into the section on how to build the IP strategy in your proposal. Unless you have anything else.
No, I just want to say that on the challenge, right? The tough challenge is also to bring everyone on the same page, on the same picture. But I think you covered
that.
Right?
That it is definitely something that it can be frustrating as proposed developer to get, because you are then, if you're not aware of this in the beginning, you get a good atmosphere, you get nice things going, you get the exchange, you start getting the input for the different work packages and different sections of the proposal. Work package group meetings start appearing here and there, and the good atmosphere, and then suddenly you realize, wait a minute, there's also and then suddenly you disrupt the whole potentially disrupt the whole thing of creating a very uncomfortable baseline suddenly to the project, and you don't want that.
I believe it's challenging in collaborative research, to make people understand on the same terminology, to understand that perhaps IP is not only patent, depending on your project, that exploitation is not only commercialization, that being the owner or the developer of the data doesn't mean that you will be able to exploit the data or to use the data for commercialization. If there is someone that has an interest to exploit the result and they depend on that data. So bringing all these different pieces, right, together, it is challenging in the proposal phase, but it is worth it to discuss it clearly, because then you have a proposal that is not just credible and increases the chances to get funded, but also in the project implementation, it runs smoothly, and this is what you want. Yeah.
Exactly.
Hello, I'm Chiara Ligori, and I am so happy that I've joined this networking event. I invite you all to listen to the Grant podcast.
And it's a nice fly-in and bridge to this section. So because it's now, I'm gonna need your help, because I don't remember all these things from. It's been some years since I was sitting with these things. So let's just move into, and here you might want to. Many of you will put pen to paper when you listen to this, because this is going to give you a little bit of a guiding on how to sit and develop the IP strategy in your proposal. So how to approach IP and the template. So the floor is yours, Luis.
Yeah. So normally the IP issues are linked to the exploitation strategy, right? You have to come up with a post-project exploitation plan in your proposal. That normally goes into your section 2 and the impact. And try to be more coherent, right? Understand that if you're talking about commercialization, you might have to have a clear description of the catalog of intellectual property rights that you will use in this commercialization plan, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
People tend to talk about licensing, but they focus only on one intellectual property right and not in the others, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are, for instance, in Europe, we have the European trade secret directive, that it was basically the focus is to facilitate research and innovation projects without depending on a patent, because we know the costs are associated to that.
Mhm.
And this is also something that should be covered in your section 2, right? And in your post-project exploitation plan. But also in section 3, which is referring to the implementation, there's also activities that you have to consider when you're writing, what will be the milestones, right, in your project implementation. So if you're saying that you develop an ingredient or component that will be part of another product prototype in another work package, there you have a milestone, right? And you need to make sure that okay, from the developers of that early, stage component, or the same thing, who will be the owners, etc. So this is something that you will probably have to consider in the implementation, in the section where you describe what are the activities, right, for during the project implementation to assess properly all these issues.
Yeah. So that's sort of the outline of where you need to consider IP in the template itself. So now, in relation to what you need to consider or decide upon. So you have all this with ownership, access rights, background, foreground, IP, and so on and so forth. Can you explain a little bit?
In relation to background, foreground,
the terms and how to deal with it when you sit and write the proposal.
Yes. So since it will take a long time, to answer this question, but for sure,
give it a shot.
Look into, for instance, if you're talking about background, you want to know these terms and conditions, look into your licenses, right? Whatever you have. If you are interested in clarifying the applicable intellectual property rights, for the protection, right? You have results, and the results you're supposed to protect them. This is a mandate, if it's possible, and you probably have to clarify that in the proposal, right?
Yeah.
In terms of budget, is also important, right? To anticipate what will be the cost for filing intellectual property rights for the protection of your result. This is an eligible cost to the Horizon Europe projects. So perhaps you want to, in your proposal, anticipate the steps towards IP protection, filing of patent application, filing of trademark applications, and all the other intellectual property rights that they are. So I think this is something that perhaps in the implementation phase you should cover, right, with the activities. When are you supposed to finalize your agreement? Because when you're talking about exploitation planning, you should have an idea of, again, the milestones that you have to achieve to commit, because an exploitation plan without commitment is not credible. But you cannot set up an agreement for exploitation when you're writing the proposal. No, so perhaps you have to set up some sort of a schedule or roadmap of activities, in your implementation part of the proposal. To define when exactly you will have to have this agreement and filing of intellectual property rights applications.
I think also this corner, we have to sketch out so you have these definitions of foreground and background. So background IP, that's what you bring into the proposal. That's what that's yours. Nobody can ever touch that. So if we're talking about legal measures here, or like who owns what, then if we're talking ownership, then all partners, technical partners or the research organizations, they bring something to the table. And what they bring, when they have developed themselves, no matter what, it belongs to them. Now, what is the results of the project? What comes out of it that you need to look at who owns that? What's the ownership of that? So that's called foreground. and that is the cake you need to decide and cut up. That we in the introduction to this conversation or this blog in this episode, that's the dialogue you need to have in between the different partners. Who gets what? And then you have, so that's the ownership part, especially relevant for the technical, for the corporate partners. And then you have the researchers. They would like to have a license or access rights to use the research that they're dealing with to develop further their research when they move on. That's sort of the landscape you need to map. Yeah, when you that's correct. Yeah, this is something you need to do when you, and as we said and talked about here and up to this part of the episode, it's good if you can do this as early as possible, because then everybody knows who is whose, and everybody knows what they expect to get on the other side. Yeah, because that's where that's where you might have some discussions. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Look, ownership, confidentiality, access right for project implementation, access right for post-project exploitation or for exploitation in general. Access rights means also access right to background and access right to foreground or results. No. What they are already in the grant agreement. This is actually why the proposal should cover these aspects in the implementation part, right? Because the European Commission have already provided an annotated grant agreement. In the annotated grant agreement, you see the practical principles or how you should consider the intellectual property or the background that you bring into the project and what is coming out. No? So you have these principles already clearly defined, the mandates already defined in the grant agreement. Therefore, when you're writing the proposal, you should consider these principles, this frame. And in the proposal, for sure, you can initiate the discussions whether you're expecting anticipate where you will see a collective ownership in the proposal. In the implementation part of the proposal, you should cover this, anticipate, who might be the owners of the results, right? Where you foresee the joint ownership aspects, I think is important. Based on the activities, you have a task or a work package where you have multiple partners working, especially in one single product, prototype, a result. And according to the principles in the grant agreement, you can imagine, it's basically clear that whoever actively produces a result or generates a result, and they are the owners, right?
Exactly, and this is very important to underline from the European Commission's point of view. So mind you, the grant agreement, that's your contract with the Commission. So the Commission is paying for something to come out on the other side, and the results, the Commission perceives the ones that can rightfully explore those is the full consortium as an entity, so to say. Yeah?
Careful, because there's also something that I always deal with in not just in the proposal phase, but also during the project implementation. The consortium agreement, and maybe in the next episode we will talk about these aspects, right? But there's the consortium is a group of organizations working together on a simple framework, but that doesn't mean there is a legal entity together joining every partner. No, it's just a collaboration framework, and therefore each one of these organizations have their own obligations. But towards the European Commission.
But they can explore any of the results from the European Commission's point of view. Yeah. So therefore, the consortium agreement is where you cut the cake internally.
Yeah, you can also cut cake in the proposal phase.
Yeah.
I would say, I think to me is very important that it is clear in the actual implementation part. Okay, if we anticipate that there will be a joint ownership, let's say, when are we actually going to cut cake? The cake, not during the project implementation. No, that's important. It is very important in terms of projects that are dealing with data. This is I can, for instance, the European Open Science Cloud publish a document very interesting about the legal interoperability issues around and fair guiding principles. This is very important because in all the projects when we are developing new technologies, you have 16 restrictions. In the proposal phase, it's very important to understand all these aspects, right? All these issues. Do we have the access to the data? We don't. Okay, mitigation plan. Are we allowed to make data compilations? Do we have the licenses clear? Who will be the owner of around this data, and who will have the priority when deciding how to exploit the data? This is.
You do also, now I remember, you have got this this table of who is going to explore what results. I've been sitting and doing that myself when I wrote proposals. You have a table where you put in exploitation.
Yes, it's important to anticipate in the proposal the expectations for post-project exploitation. I think this is very important. Is it, for instance, I can give you an example, things that perhaps is not that credible. Sometimes the lead research organization, is working on a prototype solution, and they said that they're going to produce millions of doses of the solution. How? I've been to and very smart people, right? Researchers, and we produce great things here in Europe. I'm surprised, right? But then you see that people produce a tiny formulation, a prototype, and in a small laboratory. Okay, and what are the expectations that this will actually reach the market? In 3 years after the end of the project. You have to cover additional steps to get to that point. And if you anticipate them in a credible way in the proposal, I think you increase the chances to get your project funded. There's no guarantee, by the way. It's a tough game.
But I think what we already now have given you out there, it gives you the building blocks to be on top of things, because that's what you need, because the proposal is 10,000 other things than this. So there's so many other things you also need to be aware of when you do this. But here, to make sure that you don't get into slippery ice towards the end of the submission, when you simply don't have the time for things to explode up into a phase. If you have made an approach like we're slowly sketching for you here, then you have mapped the things, you have taken the discussions in the group. If there is any discussion needs to be taken of bending towards each other or so on, if anything needs to be clear out, you will have the time for have legal joining meetings, stuff like this. So you can do your job as a proposal writer. You have so many other things to be aware of when you sit and do this. So it's just this hopefully gives you an idea of putting some red flags there at an early stage to help you towards the end of the submission.
Yes, that's why. I mean, I have a job because of this.
Yeah.
I'm a consultant. I don't own the results, so my job is somehow also to mediate and to advise people, to guide them, so that all the pieces of the puzzle get together without affecting the rights or the legitimate rights of other partners.
No.
This is the tough game I was talking about.
Yeah. Now here in the rundown, we have suggestions for documenting agreements prior to consortium agreement. And I guess, so you have in the proposal, you have to put a table with who's exploring what. But of course, to have non-disclosure agreements, that done. And if you need to have any paper of agreement,
Yes.
if there are two partners, specifically competitors, for instance, so if they want something put down on paper with a stamp or whatever, if they're Germans, to get that sort of calmness between the partners, then do that.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes. 100%. I know that there are people that are scared. Maybe they will lose control of their technology if they share with another partner, especially with their competitors.
Yeah.
Knowing if there's or if there will be a conflict of interest, sorry, is very important. No. It's think that when you're writing your proposal, you're not just planning something for that day, that year. Your proposal will have to develop something very innovative in the next 4 years, 3 years, and it has to be sustainable. You have to stay innovative. You have to make sure that people still use your results post project, after the end of the project. So trying to have this vision from the proposal phase is tough. If you have this agreement, non-disclosure agreement, especially when it comes to working with competitors. When you're working with competitors in a non-disclosure agreement, you basically determine what is the scope of your ownership. I think it's very good if the competitors bring up their intellectual property rights. Here's where I basically is a reminder out there to all the industry partners. If you have a technology, please go to the patent office and make a real robust intellectual property portfolio, right? With your patent, with your trademark, with your everything, right? In a way that when you join this kind of projects, you have a very well developed list of sectors, field of use where you will claim your technology, and then you can negotiate in the same way with other competitors that supposedly should be doing the same, right? So there shouldn't be any conflict, because your rights are already protected. So it's easier just to negotiate it. The patents are actually exist, to facilitate innovation through collaboration on the information that's already out there. It's different. It's harder when it comes to trade secret, right? That's a little bit more complicated, but it's still doable. And what you want to have is this legal framework defined through a non-disclosure agreement.
And I think what is important to for us also to come through with to you, dear listener, is that it's important that you can explain this. This is human psychology also. It's important that you can explain this to the potential partner, because when you sit and you build your consortium and you need a specific organization or company for the partner value chain, and then you hit something like this where, okay, who else do you have on board? Or we have these guys over there. So what will we do? So it's very, very, because one of the first questions they will ask you, second question they will ask you, it's about we don't want to have any secrets going to them. It's very important that you have yourself you can reply to that saying that, look, in an EU project, this is an agreement you make in between you, so nobody's going to steal anything from you. Everything will be put down to paper. You can define yourself what is important for you. If you run into something where after all these discussions where I said we cannot do this, then that's that. Then I cannot hold on you. But at least here, like thousands of companies are doing every year, go into EU projects with companies within their corner, and then they define together who gets what of this cake. So to be able to explain that, so they calm down, and then of course legal department will have some tougher questions than your contact from R&D probably, but at least you make them, give them a calm stomach. That's very important because they're not going to join your consortium if you don't, if you say, oh, I don't know, or that's the worst thing you can say.
And also, while you're doing that, show them I think it's important to show the big picture, okay, it means that I have to share something to be part of this project. Sure, yes, you have to, but you will also win, if this technology is actually developed, you might win a competitive advantage, because you get a first mover advantage when this thing goes out to the market. You have it is collaborative research and innovation. So perhaps whenever in the case of competitors in the same consortium, instead of just thinking, well, we are competitors, see the opportunities for collaboration, and to achieve bigger market. I think this is what we have to consider when we discuss in this aspect. The beautiful pictures,
Yeah, de-risking. You can develop something that's expensive, and then the commission, and then you get into some of the coolest organizations to collaborate with on this topic that you can also use commercially. If it's a problem.
And one more thing, right? I think it is important to talk to the lawyers, right, or to the IP strategies, or mainly the lawyers, because people don't really like this collaborative framework, right? So if we're talking about non-disclosure agreement, and you're an SME and you talk to your lawyer will say, no, stay away from this. You basically have to figure out a way, to also explain your legal counsel or whoever is managing the intellectual property, that for sure you have to share, right? You will have to collaborate. You might be facing discussions on joint ownership, which might be tricky, at some point, or that you might have to sit down on the negotiation to post-project, right, or during the project implementation to discuss these access rights. That's part of the game. The commission is not giving you funding to have a nice publication and just go to a conference and just finish that the project there. The commission is funding this project because they also want to see the creation of new jobs through new business model being creative, disruptive technology turning into concrete commercial products and services, or standards. This is the magic. So I would say when we talk to in-house legal counsel, let's try not to be negative. Let's try to look into the big picture, the benefit. How much can we actually benefit from the participation in this framework?
Yeah, it's good to have the ideological part, but most companies won't really care about them. They will care what they can get. So it's always, like de-risking. Do you want this technology to develop? Well, the commission's going to give you 70% of that. Second, you get together with very cool collaboration partners. You can make commercial collaboration with them afterwards as you want, and so on and so forth. That's often something they understand. And then if they want something for the for LinkedIn, they can say we support. It's fine.
Yeah.
But
I talked to several industry representatives, in the projects, and they also do their own private research and internal, but the benefit when they get in this project is, of course, what is the amount of investment, that it will take, only, privately to achieve this level of technology maturity, perhaps on some prototypes. So they need the collaboration with SMEs. They need collaboration with universities, with RTOs. So it's it's still in the philosophical aspects very positive, optimistic about making Europe more competitive.
They will think about how they can be more competitive.
I hope so. Yeah, too. Yeah, it's a win-win situation for everyone. It should be. It should be. But for sure, there are a lot of misunderstanding, right?
Yeah.
People having fear to lose control over the technology, or people that will researchers maybe feel like, okay, I will not be able to publish, or PhD students is oh, sorry, I will not be able to graduate because of the part industry is supposed to find a pattern, and these are just myths. There are strategies. Find an IP manager that really understands all these issues, or proven strategies, right? So that you can actually deal with all this in a good way in front of everyone in the consortium.
All right. I think we're good, no? In this block. Next block, we're moving towards the end here. Key lessons and recommendations. So, piece of advice. So, in the rundown checklist, do you have some do's and don'ts?
Yeah, the do's: start early, involve your IP experts. Again, clarify your ownership issues. The don't. Okay.
Don't wait.
Do not assume. Don't take this terminology, for granted. Or don't just don't overlook it. Just please make sure that you understand what does it mean intellectual property in your project. What intellectual property rights are needed from your side? You have a patent, okay, mention it. Check out the status of your IP portfolio, right? This is very important. Or just explain that you have an interest to file a patent from your project results. Why not? Just come up with this and calculate, take into, maybe you can make some sort of estimation of how much you will invest or you will need to protect your result, because it's important for the impact of the project, right? The impact is what happens when you exploit successfully your results. So if you don't exploit your results, you will not reach the impact, or if the strategy to exploit your results is not clear, then you will not have an impact. So I think do not underestimate the terminology. Read at least the annotated grant agreement, so that you understand what are the principles, especially the Annex 5, where you find all the conditions for exploitation, assimilation, communication. These are important.
Yeah.
I think these are, to me, the most important to do's and not to do.
Yeah. Thanks. So, do you know? So the evaluators, I think they only look at the table where you have exploitation. What each has listed from each partner, what they will take from the project as a result. No?
Wow, that's that's tricky because there are, I don't know, I think that being a reviewer of all these proposals, it is a challenging activity, right? It is not that easy. Also to prioritize,
Yeah.
It's for sure something that I have respect for the reviewers, especially when it comes to assessing the credibility of the exploitation plans. I think they will, for sure. When you write a proposal, you want to have something more, easy. The easier to read, the better it will be. But you miss a lot of in just one page how much details you can put about your exploitation strategy. So there, for sure, there's a constraint in terms of the numbers of pages that you put in a proposal, right? For each section. So if you manage to have a really clear picture of the value chain and how intellectual property fits into or add value to this supply chain for the project, I think that will be also something good to have. And in the description of the key exploitable results now. But the key exploitable results, you have some criteria already defined in the guidelines from the European Commission, on how to assess them. So consider what is the degree of innovation of your expected results. That's something that perhaps you can elaborate in a clear message to the reviewers. It doesn't have to be too long, but
No, especially also because often you don't have too much space there. That's my experience. That like when you sit with those corners of the proposal, you want to have something there, but
I worked as expert of the IPS scan, Horizon IPS scan program a few years ago. That was an initiative of the IPR help desk, and I'm also a vetted due diligence expert of the European Innovation Council. And the things that you want to see, when you get some proposals or things to have an opinion about them, is keywords, right? If you're talking about technology in a technology field that is where the market is saturated, okay, show me that you have the rights to exploit, to expand, to improve that technology. If you tell me I have a patent of this already covered and the patent is valid, I will be more relaxed. I think, okay, this is credible. It's not that during the project implementation, if I give the money to this project, right, this project would not be facing, will not be involved in some breaching of confidentiality or breaching of intellectual property rights. That's something that you want to prevent. Or I would like to prevent if I'm financing a project. These keywords are important to reflect in the proposal.
The Grant. On that note, we move into the last section that I always have, the toughest challenge. So, Louis, toughest challenge in relation to IP and proposal phase?
Yeah, again, aligning everyone in the same picture.
Yeah.
It's like when you are taking a picture of your family and you want them to smile and to jump at the same time, and you will not get it so easy. You have to have a few try. Yeah, I think it is the challenging part, getting everyone their interests, to align to each other with the interests of the other partners. I think this is the most.
Yeah, now we've been also maybe say, okay, if you plan and if you have the flag things early, then it's you won't run into troubles. But that is also not the case, right? Because sometimes you will also get bombs from legal, even though they've been involved at a stage. But then suddenly, a manager higher up in a large company becomes aware of it, and then suddenly things can be disrupted like this. So it's unfortunately, like the big industry companies, you really want to have them on board because they're important, but they're also the ones that can create the biggest issues. Or you will have SMEs or even smaller, like micro companies and so on, where you did have the discussion and they did agree, and then suddenly they realize, oh, wait a minute, we did some calculations, or we had another talk with another legal support, and so it's something, because it's so delicate, you can still run into problems. But I think the main message here, right, is that the more you plan and the more you discuss this early, the less you're likely to run into issues.
Yes, indeed. And you have to consider, that the world is still running. You have, for instance, new tariff imposed from a country. I'm not saying which. The world is.
Oh, that's America. I say. Of course, you have the real world around that affects people's companies. It's.
And somehow you have to predict. When you're writing the proposal, you have to try to anticipate, perhaps, what will you do if something happens in this direction. Imagine that, for instance, you find a call, you write a project where you have to deliver this specific technology. It is important that a partner provides a prototype, technology, and to be further, to be used for another application, or to be expand or upscale. And what happened if that that particular partner, in a year after the end of the project, a year during the project, inside the project, and cannot do that because they are established in a country where there's a war, or where or they are tariff imposed on another country, and then what happens? So can you still at least use or manage the use of intellectual property, at least that you will need? All these situations are indeed something to be considered for the risk of your proposal. And they have a key component on the intellectual property rights, because perhaps there's the solution. Perhaps you have, the partner will not provide more of the technology, but they have some knowledge around it. They can still contribute with, or I don't know. It's complex. You have to look into the case by case situation, but perhaps by knowing the scope, for not just for the use of the technology, but also not just on the technology itself, but also the legal framework around the use. Perhaps you can find ways to mitigate these events. You cannot predict them clearly. Nobody can read the future.
That's a good ending note.
Yeah, I wish.
Luis, we have to end the conversation. I'm just going to land the plane before we say goodbye to the listeners. So, dear listeners, thank you so much for listening to the end. I hope that this has been instructive for you, guiding you through this important matter. Now, if you like what you're hearing here, and if you're a newbie, then I have a surprise for you, because then you have tons of information on my platform, thegrant.eu, with more than 180 podcast episodes. They're not an IP, but they're about EU funding, proposals, projects, implementation, all corners of EU R&D funding. So thegrant.eu, and there, when you're browsing around there, then while you're there, go to the bottom of, I have that on the bottom of each page in there, a subscription, an online subscription form for my email list. So please, if you want to support a humble independent podcaster, that's the way to do it. Finally, connect with me on LinkedIn. Go find Niels Tudor Winther and connect with me. And also recommended is to go and like my The Grant page there, because that's where I have all the information flowing. That's where the community is sort of gathered. So by all means, do that. That's that. Thanks for joining me, Luis. And we have, as mentioned in the beginning, we have the follow-up episode to this one. This two sort of connected, right? So we will serve an episode for you on IP in projects also, but that's in the next episode. So Luis, thanks for joining. Let's say goodbye to dear listeners. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Grant. All the Grant episodes have their own site on the Grant website. You will find the link in the episode resume where you listen to your podcast. On the site for this episode, you'll find a link to Luis' personal LinkedIn site and a link to RTDS Group's website. Further, there's a link to the timeline series where you find the previous 26 episodes in the series. Next week, it is Shorts Week with a new episode in the Research Management series, this time with focus on securing that the implemented strategy becomes sustainable. You can look forward to that.